Hello, happy Louisville, Kentucky Derby weekend for us three. This is usually a day where the schools are closed. We're talking in
Yep.
Kentucky Oaks. We're drinking our mint juleps. We were just teasing about this here a second ago. These are classic mint julep cups. Sadly, with the pandemic, there's no Derby this year. So what is usually a crazy week in Louisville, Kentucky, is like just a calm, quiet spring. I'm joined here with Brad Shuck, Dr. Brad Shuck from the University of Louisville, and Martin Low of OnPlane Consulting. Thank you guys for once again jumping on to talk all things employee connectedness. So yeah, we pour one out for the Kentucky Derby this weekend, which is really like a marker for the entire calendar year here in our community, where we sort of come together, stop what we're doing, and celebrate. It's like our New Year's. Like I mark more of my life around this weekend than I do with New Year's or anything else, right? It's kind of strange, but I love that, and I think we'll all miss it. So that's a nice segue into thinking about what have we lost with what's going on with the social isolation, and what have we found? This was a subject idea from Martin. I think, Martin, you were inspired by a driveway conversation you were having 6 feet apart with one of your neighbors. Tell me about this, just the inspiration for this idea of lost and found right now with COVID-19.
Yeah, well, so to me, there's this interesting paradigm of there's a number of things that we've lost, and there's sometimes some mourning for those things that you've lost, whether it's a coffee shop where you like to go to in the morning, or a routine that you were in with your family or your kids or a friend. Um, and then so there's a little bit of that. The flip side of that is that there are good things that we've lost too, and to spend a little bit of time on the mourning and the grieving side, like let's talk about the things that we've lost that we're worried about, but to then quickly start thinking about, well, what have we lost that actually hasn't been all that bad? And then I think that there's things that people have found through this that are really interesting to reflect on, and there's a lot of really great things in that found column too. And when you're in this time of uncertainty, anything you can do to give yourself a little bit of focus onto some certainty, I think helps a lot. And to start thinking about, what have I found that makes me better coming out of this? What have I lost that makes me better coming out of this? There's a lot of good things, I think, that happen out of these tough times. It's just super hard to see them when you're this close to the event. So it was really interesting, though, to start having that conversation. And then I think the other thing is those things that we've lost and those things that we found set the stage for what life might look like, or gives us a little glimpse of what life might look like when we get to the other side of this, whenever that might be. So it was just an interesting conversation to start having. It's been really interesting to hear people's responses to that, because when you stop and reflect on it, there's a lot out there that's happened very, very quickly.
So when we think about loss, it's like shedding some of the things that maybe we don't need in our life, whether it's stress and anxiety or just baggage, and maybe putting too much effort toward things that really don't matter in the grand scheme of what makes us content and the richness we get from social connection in our work. Brad, kind of, I love your lens as the researcher in these conversations, and I'm always kind of curious of, from your perspective and the conversations you've been having in the last few months with what's going on, from a business perspective, before we get on the personal level, what are you hearing in terms of this whole context of lost, as it pertains to employee connectedness?
Yeah, so some of the things I think we've lost are uh, meetings that we didn't need to have, which is kind of a good thing. I think we were realizing across the board that there were some things that we were just insistent on having because they were a part of a routine or a ritual that we did, that we've had to shift and do this differently. And I think that's going to be a good thing. So, I mean, to Martin's point, shutting meetings that maybe we didn't need to have, maybe projects we didn't need to be working on because they weren't priority to the core of our business, and that became really apparent as soon as we started to stay at home and have a shelter in place kind of order, and we didn't go into the office anymore. What I don't think we've lost, though, is connection. That connection continues, and it's amazing that we've had this technology that allows us to stay connected with each other across the board within our organization, and that we can continue to work on projects together collaboratively, even though we're socially distant. We're not emotionally distant from each other.
I like that answer a lot. I'll jump in here as a person who's been doing remote work for many, many years. There's sort of an inside joke that you'll see in people that are kind of like remote work ambassadors like myself, which is, someone's new to remote work if they think to maintain connection, they need to be on video conferences all day, right? This idea that you still have a lot of meetings and everyone's just jumping on Zoom after Zoom after Zoom. You're doing it wrong if you're doing it that way. It's one of the muscles you have to develop when you're not all working in the same office is understanding what it takes to be a good asynchronous communicator, being able to write up things you're working on, things you're thinking about, and being able to share that around the team, whether you're using Teams or Slack or email, and realize that people don't have to respond immediately. People can respond 2 hours later. They can respond tomorrow, but like conversations can happen and things can move forward and decisions can be made once your team gets good at learning how to communicate asynchronously and not doing the back-to-back-to-back meeting thing on video conferencing.
Wait a minute. Charlie, wait, I just want to interrupt you here for a second. Like, I just want to make sure I understand you correctly. I don't have to be on back-to-back-to-back-to-back-to-back-to-back Zoom meetings. That's not that. Okay, you're blowing my mind here this morning.
Yeah, well,
I hope.
yeah, so I'm sure a lot of people are doing that right now, and I know what they're feeling, especially if they're introverted. They are exhausted. They are burned out 1 month into this thing because look, we're doing a live stream here where we're kind of like doing a video conferencing. Like it takes energy for me to kind of get up here and like talk to you guys because hey, the camera's on my face. I'm camera shy, right? This is all kind of not my comfortable environment. I like doing it, but if I were to do this all day, I'd be flat on the floor at the end of the day. So the most important advice I have for people right here is just learn how to communicate asynchronously and be really careful about, do you really need this meeting? Do we really need a video conference? Can this just be a phone call? Like even that will save some of your emotional energy. All right, so back to the core idea of lost and found. Let's go around the horn real quickly and let's all kind of name something else that comes to mind. Maybe it's even more on a sort of individual level here of things that you appreciate that you've lost and something you appreciate you've found. Martin, I'm going to swing it back to you to go first.
So, one of the things that I lost is we had an office and I had an expectation that like I would need to go to that office or go to these different places to spend time. And I mean, that requires drive time. It requires, driving your car, parking, all this movement around. And what I've realized is that I don't necessarily need to do that. And so that's something that I've lost that I think has resulted in me finding at least an extra hour a day. And that's been great. And that hour a day, because I'm here and my kids are here, I actually see my kids like in the middle of the day and they're so excited to see me right now. Like that's super cool because I know that that's not going to last. So, that's a big one. I think the other thing that I lost was this lens that like everything we do has to be so complicated and that we've got to do all this work just to go find these things that were kind of sitting there anyway. And, a lot of the conversations we've been having with customers or groups like this that we interact with, they're looking for something new and something fancy that shows them how they can respond to this brand new world of COVID-19. And what we found is that most of those answers were sitting there right in front of them and have been for a while. And there's nothing really fancy or special that they need to do that is all that different from what they should have been doing prior to this. It's just more noticeable that it's not happening. So, these good leadership behaviors around clarity of expectations, around making sure that people have purpose and understanding what that is, being a good communicator, spending time with the people that are on your team and showing that you care about them, none of that has changed. And, it's interesting to me that you've almost found like it's this little back to basics thing that everyone can do that we probably all should have done a little bit more of coming into this, but we can all do it right now. That's been super interesting. It's like a lot of the stuff that you need is kind of sitting there right in front of you.
That's interesting. When I think about loss for me, this is back to my last comment. Like I've been in remote for a while. Not a lot's changed, but I will say I used to break up my days with coffee meetings. And, Martin and Brad, you and I, you probably had dozens of coffees with me, and it's a great way for me to break up my day, connect with someone, because I am kind of isolated down here in my basement office, and I miss those. And it's not the same just pouring a coffee by myself. So the introvert here has had to kind of proactively reach out to people and really like program a bit of more connection, and especially in the community, because most of my team is around the world. So I need in the little community where I want to be engaged, I have to kind of proactively reach out to people and program things ahead of time. And that's kind of this new muscle I'm developing, to be social virtually. And I'm sure a lot of people are doing that. Brad, what about you? What comes to mind?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things that I miss, that I'm excited about later on. That I hope will come back, and some things I think that I've lost. So on the miss side of this, you guys may not even know this, but I'm a semi-pro drummer, and I play, and I miss playing music. I played a couple times a month, and I play here locally at Southeast Christian on the praise and worship team there, and that's something I miss terribly. It was a great group of folks that I got to play with. What we've lost on both the personal side and the professional side is time boundaries. We have just lost all sense of time boundary. My family was scheduled. We were out the door by 6:30 in the morning every day. We had meetings that we had to be at. My wife worked out at this specific time. I worked out at this specific time. We ate dinner at this specific time. We had bedtime at this specific time. I don't know, man. It was like 11:15 last time. Like, wow, maybe we ought to go to bed because we got to wake up tomorrow and maybe do some things, and so we've just lost all sense of kind of time boundary. The eating lunch, sometimes it'll be 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We're like, gosh, probably ought to eat lunch now, and I kind of think that's a good thing. We are in the flow as a family and as a unit, and same thing at work. Some things have ironed out over the last week or two regarding meetings. I was teasing Charlie about the back-to-back Zoom meetings, but that was literally first 2 weeks, 3 weeks for me were nothing but back-to-back Zoom meetings. But that's ironed out, and I've taken control back over that a little bit and saying, I don't think we need this meeting. Maybe we can do this in an email, or maybe we can do this on a quick phone call together.
All right, so now let's shift over to Found. What's something unexpected, perhaps, that you've discovered in this period that maybe you weren't thinking would happen? Martin, what comes to mind?
We found a ton of family time, and it's surprising how many we always felt like we didn't have enough time, and that we were chasing too many things, and that we couldn't really get everything done. And it's been interesting that as soon as we slowed down, we got a lot of clarity about what was most important. And we've been doing a lot of stuff that it felt like we didn't have time for before, but we were able to really prioritize, like, all right, now, all this stuff has shifted. Where should I really spend my time? And we've done that. And it's amazing how not only do I feel like I'm more productive because I'm actually getting things off the list, but I feel like I'm actually doing the stuff that I want to do. That's been great. We found a ton of family time because we're not chasing as many things, whether it's kids sports or kids school or work for me or other things that my wife was in the middle of. That's been fantastic. And along the way, we've seen, at least maybe it's probably always was there and I just didn't notice it as much, but a lot of like cool things that my kids are doing. So like, my family, my kids and I started watching all the Marvel movies in order because we wanted to get caught up, but we just haven't done that. And there's a ton of them. But one of the best moments, this is a great moment for me, is there was a scene in one of the movies. There's this cool song that comes on in the background, and it's this big, fight scene with Thor. And my 9-year-old daughter says, "Oh, that's a cool song." And my 11-year-old son goes, "Yeah, that's Led Zeppelin. They're pretty great." And it was, as a music lover, that was awesome.
I can imagine that made you a very proud dad. So I'm a dad too. I have a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. It's been a little tricky here. My wife and I have had to discover a new balance of how we sort of take time. So we're making sure the other person gets time to focus on work while the other person's making sure the kids are engaged in one way or another. So we've had to find a new rhythm, kind of like what you all are talking about, just to echo that. I'll also say that I've found a new level of empathy, not only for my wife and her finding new empathy for me, with us kind of juggling this for each other and being very good communicators and making sure if someone's getting frustrated, like we understand that and we'll kind of adjust as we need to go. But I've also, honestly, through our conversations in this live stream, I've discovered new ways to be empathetic to all the other colleagues, whether it's a single parent or a parent with two parents even with young kids, or parents with older kids and having to do homeschooling, or it's someone, when Britton Skinner joined us to talk about living alone with her dog right now, and having to do the isolation. That's got to be really tricky. And on the Unitonomy team, we have all kinds of situations, and it's interesting as we go through this whole pandemic. It really is a global thing, right? That's the definition of a pandemic, and it's probably the first time in my life I've ever experienced something that's a global nature like this, and it's been neat to see people come together and hopefully develop that level of empathy. All right, Brad, how about you?
Yeah, so we have found very similar. So I'm going to echo the family time, and just discovering new ways to hang out together and do things as a family, which has been really, really cool. I found new frames of reference, and new ways to think about capacity in my own life, and personally and professionally, and that's been really healthy, I think, for me. I've been very clear about areas of focus, things I want to do, things I want to make sure that we accomplish, and I found different ways to think about productivity and how I define a successful day, a successful week, and those things look very different than they did six weeks ago, 8 weeks ago. 8 weeks ago, I would have defined success by being on airplanes and out and doing research and publishing papers and things like that. And now, success might look like working out with my wife, making sure we get our time in together and sitting down as a family, having a little outside time, and making sure my email inbox isn't blowing up. And that might be a successful day for me. So reframing that, rethinking about that's been terrific, and it's something we found.
I love that answer. It's almost like this whole period for us, to be a bit explicit, is like learning how not to give a fuck about the bullshit, right? It's like, Martin, I love stealing your line here of don't borrow stress and anxiety from the future, right? I think there is a chance right now where everyone's redefining what really matters in life, really connecting with their families, connecting with their loved ones, and making sure that like there really is the work-life balance that we've been talking for over a decade about achieving. Boom. This is really the time out for everyone to find that balance. And I hope people are. I know it's not easy. It's, we have our good days and bad days here in this house, and I'm sure that's true for everyone. But
Sure.
it has been really nice on the grand scale. Well, thank you guys. This is another awesome conversation. I appreciate your time. Martin Low, OnPlane Consulting, Dr. Brad Shuck, University of Charley Miller of Unitonomy. Thank you all, and we'll see you next week.